Ohio is a rugged Rust Belt town built on manufacturing and big industry. But Cleveland has also seen more than its fair share of adversity. And in the early 2000s, a string of mysterious disappearances would eventually lead police to a monster lurking in their midst. Cleveland was founded in 1796 at the mouth of the Cuyahoga River, the perfect location for a city destined to become an industrial powerhouse.
The reason that Cleveland was primed for this type of growth and the industries itself is where it's located along, Lake Erie and access to the river. You were able to bring in a lot of different shipments and then an easy way to export things out of the city.
The steel industry, the railroad industry, just helped facilitate the whole Midwest in its developments.
You had a lot of manufacturing jobs. The steel mills were extremely popular, and then the auto manufacturers as well.
Back in the Roaring 20s, you would have seen many smokestacks, many factories.
Plentiful job opportunities soon brought immigrants from around the world.
Cleveland was a destination for many of the European immigrants, a lot of the Irish, a lot of the Hungarian people came. They settled in the area known as Buckeye. What's great about the city is that you get all sorts of wonderful, diverse culture from the immigration that came in. I mean, you have some of the just fabulous Italian restaurants. There's a section called Little Italy. People from all parts of the world.
Black workers from the South would play an especially important role in the city's growth.
The Black workforce was extremely integral in building what we see today, largely because you didn't have to have a lot of formal training or education to be successful. You had individuals that were coming from backgrounds where they were marginalized, not provided access. And for the first time, they were able to enter into a workforce where they could also have that same sense of pride and ownership and be respected for their contributions.
Those same laborers helped lay the foundation of Cleveland's cultural identity.
You had this really interesting melting pot because you had these different neighborhoods where you knew this is where the Slovenians lived, this is where the Italians lived, this is where the Irish, this is where the Black community had migrated to Cleveland. There was a really bustling, Black, I would say, corridor and thoroughfare where you had hotels, you had restaurants, you had clubs. The, term rock and roll was really coined in Cleveland by groups like the OJs and others that came out of Cleveland.
But as with many cities in the U.S., by the mid-1960s, redlining and housing discrimination would lead to a stark racial divide in Cleveland.
The county became very divided racially. It was an east-west thing. The east part of the city was Black. The west side of the city was white.
The names that come to mind in terms of prominent Black communities in the heyday of Cleveland would be like Huff and Glenville, and now, Fairfax as well, because these were places that Black Clevelanders really kind of concentrated.
But despite the divide, Clevelanders are united by a common love for their city.
What are the three things that we always come together on? Music, food, and sports. And so with Cleveland being a big music town, a big food town, and a big sports town, a lot of the times you're forgetting that you're different races. You're forgetting that you're from a different background because we're fighting this together. We all want the Browns to win. We all want a corned beef sandwich, and we all want to listen to a great live band. And so for us, it's oftentimes putting aside our differences because our similarities are more powerful.
One of the things that people, really united on, especially in this blue collar kind of town, is everybody had to work for it. I mean, people talk about nothing is given in Cleveland, you have to earn it.
Although that unity has helped Cleveland's residents overcome many hardships, the city would once again be put to the test when it became the hunting ground for one of America's most infamous predators. Friday, April 2nd, 2004. It's a rainy spring afternoon in Cleveland's West Boulevard neighborhood. Children file out of Wilbur Wright Middle School ready to start the weekend.
If you can imagine, the school day ending at any school, kids are taking school buses, some kids are walking home.
Among the excited students is 14-year-old Gina DeJesus.
Gina was a young middle school girl and, getting into the very prime and fun part of your life as a young lady.
She was born on the West Side, and she's one of 3 kids. She's the baby. And the parents, as far as I know, were always doting of her. She was always dancing around. She was just always happy doing what a typical 14-year-old would do. You go home, you hang out with your friends, maybe go to the corner store. She was walking home with her friend Arlene, and Arlene decided to stop and call her mom to see if she can go over to her house. So remember, at the time, there weren't cell phones, so they used a payphone. And then her mom, Arlene's mom, said, no, I want you to come home. And so at that point, the two parted ways.
She lent her friend some change in order for her friend to call, make a phone call. And from that point, she no longer had the money for a bus ride, so she decided to continue to walk. So she walked along eastbound on Lorraine Avenue.
Lorraine Avenue in that area is very middle class, working class neighborhood. You've got some family-owned restaurants. You've got some businesses. You got a couple of fast food places, a couple of strip malls. Some local taverns.
This wasn't like some sort of back alley or dark thoroughfare.
Several hours later, Gina's parents grow concerned when she still hasn't made it home.
She just never showed up. And anyone who's a parent knows their kid's routine. And these two parents knew that routine.
As time goes by, an hour, 2 hours, now you're like, no, I haven't seen her. No one has seen her. When you start making your phone calls to your friends, relatives, check and see if she's over so-and-so's house. See if has anyone seen her down the street. Maybe she stopped at the store before she got home. By the time dinner time comes around and the panic kind of sets in.
Around 5:30 p.m., Gina's parents contact police to report their daughter missing.
Her parents were saying Gina would not take off like this. She wouldn't run away. She has a good life here. She has a good family. She has no reason to run away. And they were just totally confused over why their daughter was missing.
To Cleveland detectives, Gina doesn't fit the profile of a teen runaway, so their focus shifts to a much grimmer possibility.
Obviously, the last thing that someone would think would be that their child or their loved one was abducted.
Well, this very, very quickly shifted from, somebody who didn't come home, maybe she's gone to a friend's house, to a full-blown missing persons investigation.
Cleveland police scour Lorraine Avenue, looking for any possible leads.
The resources are concentrated in a 6-block area every day, all day, to see if we can't pick something up. Even a conversation of someone pulling to the side of the road and talking to someone could be innocent for directions. We want to talk to that person. We want to see what's, who they are and what they're saying. We identified some young female officers that would, walk around undercover and see if anyone, says anything to you. Like I said, we were really looking for, for anything or anybody that we could legally stop and talk to and have a conversation with, and see if that would lead to something.
And I remember as a reporter, you'd go around in the neighborhood, and if there's a car dealership there, if there's a fast food store there, or if there is a convenience store there, you're looking to see if there are cameras. And yeah, there weren't very many cameras, not like today. But no, there was nothing. There was nothing. I thought she was dead. After 24 hours, if you can't find anything, you're not going to find them.
14-year-old Gina DeJesus has been reported missing by her family after she failed to return home from school. Cleveland police have launched a search for the missing girl, but she appears to have vanished without a trace.
Can't place her between leaving school, getting to Lorraine, and in between her home. You know, can't place her there. Can't find anybody that saw anything unusual. We conducted days and days and days of surveillance in the area just to see if, anything happened. We had the FBI assist us. We had the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, assist us.
But as investigators soon discover, Gina isn't the only girl who's gone missing from the area. In April of 2003, nearly 1 year to the day before Gina vanished, 16-year-old Amanda Berry disappeared a block away from where Gina was last seen.
She had left work at a Burger King at West 110th and Lorraine and started walking northbound on West 110th. Her house was only a few yards away from where she was last seen, and she disappeared, just in thin air.
So right away, similarities, same time, general location. So we became very focused on that.
Because of the proximity of Amanda's disappearance and the fact that they're both teenagers taken in broad daylight, those two investigations started to run along the same track.
What's going on? Who's doing this? We got somebody in our community snatching these girls.
Although police suspect the cases are connected, they are unable to come up with any solid leads.
The families did a good job of continuing to keep Amanda and Gina's case at the forefront. I know personally, investigators had their missing persons posters up at their desks, and every day they saw them. Every day they thought and tried to follow leads that came in, trying to find both Amanda and Gina.
Nearly a decade goes by without a break in either case. But that all changes on May 6th, 2013, when 44-year-old Charles Ramsey hears noises coming from his neighbor's house.
He's, just sitting in his living room, about to bite into his cheeseburger. Then all of a sudden he hears, this banging coming from next door.
Boom, 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 boom. Finally, I get up and look outside the window. The boom, boom, boom is not on my door.
Charles goes outside and he looks at his neighbor's house there, and he sees this young woman banging on the door and trying to slip her arm out between the storm door and the door frame. Get me out of here! Get me out of here! He tugs on the storm door, and it's he couldn't get it to open any further.
I ripped that door off its hinges. Reason why? It was chained. So this wasn't going to be no easy task. All right, so you had to put some muscle into it.
She crawls through the door, and then she brings her child. And this child is just in terror. This child's totally scared to death, just crying and screaming, carrying on. And this woman says, I'm Amanda Berry. He, called the police, and the police, come flying down Seymour Avenue.
As soon as we got to Seymour, we saw a little crowd off to the left-hand side, which was the driver's side of the car. And we saw a girl standing there holding a baby. As soon as we got close enough, she walked up towards the driver's side of the vehicle, and she said, "My name is Amanda Berry." And my partner, asked her, is there anybody else in the house? She stated to my partner, yeah, Gina DeJesus and another girl was in the house. Me and my partner looked at each other. We just couldn't believe what we were hearing. We go into save mode. We got to save these two other girls. We go in, we pull our guns. I immediately, on my right-hand side, saw a stairwell. Then there was a second flight to get to the landing of the second floor. Now, that was kind of a scary part because I didn't know, if I pulled this curtain back, was this guy going to be standing there, with a gun? Was he going to charge at me? I was yelling out, Cleveland police, Cleveland police. It was silent, couldn't hear anything. So I just went for it and pulled the curtain back. And there was nothing there. Off to the left, there was a bedroom that was open. We saw a mattress on the floor and the light was on. And there was just toys scattered all over the place. All of a sudden, I see a little head poke out of around the corner of the door jamb. I thought it was a small child, and she jumped on me, put her arms around my neck, put her legs around my waist, and was screaming in my face, "You saved us, you saved us." My name is Michelle Knight. I've been here for, 11 years. I saw another shadow come around the corner, and I could see who it was. And for confirmation, I asked her name, and she told me her name was Georgina DeJesus. And I told her, we were looking for you for a long time. And I told her you were safe now.
Cleveland police have just rescued 3 women being held captive in a residential neighborhood.
Not only did we find Amanda Berry and Gina DeJesus, who we all knew were missing, but there was a third person, Michelle Knight, that was on nobody's radar, and she also emerged from this house of horrors, as well as a fourth person, a little person that was actually born into captivity.
When I found out who the child was, I was happy for Amanda, but at the same time, kind of sad that who the father had to be.
While the survivors are taken to the hospital for treatment, investigators conduct a search of the home.
We were looking around the house, making sure nobody else was in there, and we were seeing horrific, chains and locks with holes in the doors where he would lock the doors and he would pass food through these holes, to these girls for them to eat, when he decided to feed them. It was just a horrific sight to see.
All the windows had indoor doors tacked onto them, so you could never see the light of day. It was dark.
There was no air conditioning, so just imagine living in a situation like that during the hot summers, the hot, humid summers that Cleveland has, as well as the temperature changes in the winter.
They were in those chains 24/7. It was very daunting to think of that, and to think that there was a little girl in one of those rooms.
You feel sorry for these girls on what they went through, all these years, and, it makes you wonder how resilient they were.
The identity of their abductor isn't hard to determine. Police find mail addressed to a 52-year-old man named Ariel Castro.
Ariel Castro was known within certain circles because he was a musician. Everybody in the neighborhood, they didn't say he was a monster. They just said he was weird.
just kind of kept to himself. Went to work, came home, and tinkered with his cars in the backyard, and that was it.
Castro was a bus driver, of all things. But, he has own children, an own family that he was estranged from. So his wife had left him, taken the children, and he had only seen them on occasion.
All three women say Castro abducted them and held them prisoner for the past 10 years.
Michelle was pretty much under the radar at that time. When she was taken in 2002, she was an adult.
He came up to her and began talking to her at the dollar store, and asked her if she needed a ride to where she was going, and she said, well, okay, yeah, I guess, I'll go with you.
She had kind of recognized him as the father of somebody she went to school with. So she felt safe that she knew her daughter, and so she got into the van with him.
She gets in the car, and then he starts saying I have puppies at my house. You want to see the puppies? He takes her to the house, and she looks around. She goes, there's no puppies. And then he takes her upstairs.
As soon as she got upstairs, he locked the door.
She realizes that she's stuck. And then he brutalizes her and rapes her and holds her hostage. And she was the first one. She was there for a whole year by herself.
Michelle Knight was 21 years old at the time she went missing. And even though her family did make a missing persons report, there was never that same family involvement with her disappearance. She was an adult, so the feeling was that maybe she went somewhere, left on her own accord.
By April of 2003, Castro was on the prowl for his next victim.
Amanda starts to walk home, and Castro had already had his sights set on her. So he was already deciding he was going to get this second person in the home.
Amanda knew his son. They went to school together. They worked at Burger King. She was on her way home. It was a day before her birthday. So she took a ride.
He used the fact that she knew his son to his advantage, and he said, I'll take you home, and he didn't take her home. He took her straight to the house. And did the same thing he did with Michelle. Tied her up, beat her, assaulted her, raped her.
And then once that happened, and again, nobody found him, people were looking for her, but not him, then he did it with Gina.
Gina also trusted Castro because he was the father of her best friend.
Arlene is Ariel Castro's daughter, and she had no clue her father was a part of it. So basically, he used his daughter to get to Gina. She got in a car with her friend's dad, who she had known. No one would ever suspect that because she willingly got in the car. And that's why she just vanished out of nowhere.
But as investigators will soon discover, they've only scratched the surface of Castro's nightmarish crimes.
I felt disgusted. I mean, how a human being can treat another human being.
Cleveland police have discovered that a bus driver named Ariel Castro has been kidnapping young women and holding them captive for years. The torments his survivors describe are almost unimaginable.
Initially, he would kidnap one of them, and to break him mentally, he would take him downstairs and chain him up.
Those chains were chains that you would use to tow cars. I'm not talking about a little chain link that you wrap around, the fence post to let your dog go outside and go to the bathroom.
And after he forced himself, repeatedly raped them, he would put a helmet on their head for hours and hours and hours. And then the only way they can go to the bathroom was in a bucket. There was no toilet.
He would exchange a simple luxury of going to the bathroom or taking a shower for a sexual favor. I mean, it's pretty horrific when you sit and think about some of the things they had to do or barter for food.
Castro also liked to play sadistic mind games to break their spirits.
He would often test them. He would sometimes, act like he was going to work and then come back 5 minutes later to see if they were trying to get out, trying to escape in some way.
He would catch them and he would beat them, and then he would hog tie them in the basement for long periods of time. He would continue to do this over and over and over again until they just decided not to try it anymore.
People would say, well, why wouldn't you scream and yell? I would have. You would think that until you're in that position, that he mentally changed the way they think. You have chains on you. You're locked down. You're in separate rooms. What do you do?
Worse yet, 2 of the women had become pregnant during the years of sexual abuse.
Michelle had became pregnant a few times, but Ariel did not want a baby from Michelle, and he would punch her in the stomach constantly when he would find out that she would be pregnant, and that's how he would abort the child.
Like Michelle, Amanda Berry also became pregnant. She would give birth on Christmas Day of 2006, 3 years after her abduction.
Amanda's daughter was born in one of those, those summer pools that have little fish in them.
Michelle was assisting in that birth, and Ariel was saying, you better make sure this child survives, because if this child dies, you die. You can imagine the pressure that was on her.
When the baby was born, the baby wasn't breathing. So Michelle gave the baby CPR and it started breathing. If it wasn't for Michelle, where would that baby be?
Big change came when the child started to understand and started to notice. And as children, they ask a lot of questions. And one of the questions that the child asked was about the chains. Why is my mom chained up? He did not want the child to say something to outsiders that my mom's being chained up in the house. So from that point on, he stopped using the chains, but still would lock the doors. So the child kind of changed the dynamics inside the house.
The women bided their time, waiting for a chance to escape. It would finally come on May 6, 2013.
Ariel had left the house. Normally, he locks everything down, but that particular day, he did not lock one of the doors down all the way.
Amanda saw that as an opportunity, so she took that chance, grabbed her daughter, went down the stairs, opened the multiple chains that were on that front door, got the front door open, but the storm door, the outer door, was actually welded shut.
She yelled at the other girls that, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for it. And that's when she began, banging on the door.
The survivors are now safe, but Castro is still at large. And Cleveland police are about to launch the biggest manhunt in the city's history. Child abductions are rare, and very few kidnappers hold on to their victims for years. To survive that long in captivity, victims must mentally adapt to their situation. That often means giving up any hope of escape.
Imagine what it would take to control, 3 adult women. The way you would have to psychologically break them down constantly, just to maintain control and order.
they kept always on the edge as to what he was doing. So not only was it physical chains, but there was also psychological chains that kept them in that state for so long.
Investigators are on the hunt for 52-year-old Ariel Castro, a bus driver who for 10 years kept 3 women and a child in prison in his Cleveland home. Luckily, they wouldn't have to search very long.
As Amanda was outside with the other officers, she gave more information on Ariel Castro. She was giving what type of car he was driving and things like that. The officers gave that information to our dispatch, and our dispatch had ran Ariel Castro's name and, found the vehicle that he was driving, found the license plate, and broadcasted that information to any other vehicle that was out patrolling the area.
Sure enough, another officer saw this blue convertible pulling into the McDonald's parking lot, and it had a guy who matched the description in it. And so they did a takedown right there at the McDonald's.
When detectives run a background check on Castro, they uncover a troubled past full of violence and abuse.
There was this whole history with him, with his common-law wife, where he beat in her head, and the police were called several times. And he brutalized her, absolutely brutalized her.
He was into all sorts of sick forms of pornography and just was a twisted person.
You often find these individuals who commit these types of things, they do keep a low profile. So it's not someone who seems very threatening, very simple, easygoing kind of guy who could easily blend in.
In the interrogation room, Castro freely admits to the kidnappings, but he claims that the women chose to stay with him of their own free will.
He was delusional. He sat there and talked about how everything was great and wonderful, and he loved his daughter, and he took her out.
He actually went to a diatribe of how well he took care of them, and look how healthy they are and how better off they are. They admit them.
I don't mind if these girls, I treat them well with more information.
Yeah. And they
neglect them right there.
He tried to downplay his role and make it sound like they're one big happy family. He actually had videotapes of events in there, of Christmas, of Easter, where he tried to have like some sort of family atmosphere in there.
He said they all could have left when they wanted to. Well, no, they didn't leave because they couldn't. And you told them if they do leave, you're going to kill them. So did they really have much of a choice in this idyllic family that you created in your mind?
Castro also denied subjecting the women to any kind of sexual abuse.
It wasn't by force.
You're saying the sex that you had with her was not by force?
Right.
And in your words, what type of sex was it?
Confessional.
He talked about him being a victim and that there was harmony in my home. I'm like, you gotta really be demented to think there was harmony with 3 kidnapped people that you raped repeatedly.
Castro's claims of innocence fall on deaf ears, however. Prosecutors are determined to get him off the streets forever.
Our boss felt that he needed to pay for every day of harm that he brought to these girls. His feeling was that we had to charge for every day that they were harmed.
The initial charges were around 300 charges, but as we continued the interview process and continued to look through some of the documentation of the events that happened in the house, we realized there were many more charges, including this issue with the pregnancy and the termination of the pregnancy of Michelle Knight.
I mean, if there's a living being creature in your belly and somebody hurts you and, you have to inevitably discard it somehow, then that's murder. And we charged it that way.
After holding 3 young women prisoner in his home on Seymour Avenue, Ariel Castro faces hundreds of charges, including kidnapping, rape, and murder. His arrest marks the end of one of the most disturbing crime sprees the city has ever seen.
I could not believe that happened in our city. I couldn't believe it happened to those women. I couldn't believe there was a person that was that close. Someone that could be in our backyard that could accomplish something like that.
The fact that there was a rescue and there could be somewhat of a positive ending is what really, I think, galvanized the city.
As Castro's trial approaches, he tries to avoid taking responsibility for his actions.
He, constantly says, I'm not a monster. He needs help. He's the victim in this whole thing. And he took every single chance he got, including writing out a 4-page letter that outlined all his issues and things that happened to him as a child, and that he just couldn't control himself.
He was abused as a kid in all sorts of horrible ways, and unfortunately, kids who suffer that type of abuse have a tendency to repeat that pattern.
He was addicted to porn, addicted to sexual deviancies. He thought he's the one that's a victim here, and he should be helped and not punished for what he did.
His court-appointed psychiatrist sees things differently, however.
There were several experts that took a look at the case and looked at his interview. They all, I think, came back to the same conclusion. He's a sociopath. He had no feelings of others. It was all about him. It's all about his pleasure in life as opposed to anybody else's.
There was talk about some sexual deviancy, sexual addiction, but nobody was buying the victim. I'm the victim thing.
On July 17, 2013, Ariel Castro pleads not guilty to 977 separate charges. The following week, he changes his mind and accepts a plea deal.
Initially, they wanted him to get the death penalty. They took that off the table in order to get a plea deal so the girls wouldn't have to testify, because they would have to relive all of that.
My office was not in the business to re-victimize 3 young women that had been held captive for over a decade. So the plea agreement was in our efforts to protect our victims and punish the offender.
He is sentenced to life in prison plus 1,000 years, all without the possibility of parole. However, less than a month later, his incarceration comes to a surprising end.
I was in my office. Somebody had came by and said, "Did you hear Castro killed himself?"
The first thing that I thought was, wow, the survivors were able to survive for 9+ years, almost a decade, and he couldn't survive for 30 days locked up in a jail cell. And they just told you all you needed to know about Castro.
Ariel Castro's name remains one of the most notorious in Cleveland's history. And for the women who survived his reign of terror, his death would be a new beginning.
For them to have the resilience that they had to come out and be able to tell their story is amazing. Amazing. I'm in awe of them all the time. For them to have survived this says a lot about who they are.
They're my heroes. I'm so happy for them that they're doing well. Michelle, she travels and speaks Amanda Berry, she does the missing persons section for the Fox 8 News in Cleveland. Gina does the Amber Alert system for Ohio. They deserve everything that's good coming to them.
It's going to be hard to look at a silhouette of the city of Cleveland and not remember this crime, not remember the great celebration that followed the resolution of one of the most horrific crimes that this city has ever seen.